Hi, I'm Victor, and you're welcome to another episode of the Jaguar podcast. Of course, this podcast we talk about the lived experiences of Nigerians in the diaspora. I'm trying to expect an episode to have dropped last weekend. Unfortunately, that did not drop. Within the next few minutes, we're going to discuss that. But without wasting much time, I'm going to let my new guest introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Chisom. I don't know if I qualify as a Japa because I left in '09, but I've been in Canada, Toronto, Canada since 2009, and I'm glad to share my experiences with you.
All right. Thank you very much, Chisom, for agreeing to do this. I didn't even know you've been in Canada for such a long time. 2009, that's 15 years,
Yep.
around that.
Yes.
I'm terrible at maths, don't mind me. All right, so thank you very much for joining, Chisom. Um, Usually I start by asking, what have you been up to and how have you been? And I think it's a very important because this is a Friday, so you can tell us what you've done within the last within the this week rather. Yeah.
So what have been up to? Well, I'm also a baker slash content creator. So a lot of my life revolves around Monday to Friday working 9 to 5 and also shooting content for social media. This week as well, I started volunteering with City Parks in Toronto. This was the first day or the first week following like the spring. So I went out on Wednesday to plant trees and pull up invasive plants. I really like nature, so I thought to invest and give back to nature. And it's a great opportunity as well to meet people. So yeah, but I'm expecting a quiet weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that's about it. I could ask you as well if you want to share what your week
Yes,
has
of course,
been like.
I'm going to share. So, I mean, I'm also going to share because I think it's very important to update my listeners of some of the things that's happened. So, within the time I did my last recording, and now I started a new job and I've moved houses. So, I mentioned on
Congratulations.
the podcast, thank you very much. I mentioned on the podcast that I was looking for accommodation. I never said why I had to move. So, it's
Hmm.
just like I was looking for an apartment, but it was because of a new job and it was about the job is 2 hours away from where I used to live, and it was not sustainable going from there to my new job. So I had to get another accommodation, and now I'm living in a very small European city. And that's a story for another day. I don't even want to go into it, but I think I want to document my experience in my newsletter. I started a newsletter in February where I basically give a monthly rundown of my experience. I think for me, it's just like to document my life because just so I don't forget things that happened to me, and also because I was missing. I used to have a blog, so I missed writing. I thought, let me start something. Let me start journaling again, and that's why the newsletter has been. So hopefully by this end of this month, I'm going to share my experience of living at least for 1 month in a small rural German city. It's different. It's like
Sorry. Can I
I
just
don't
ask,
even
can you speak
go ahead.
German? Can you speak German?
Not not exactly. I'm learning. I speak enough to get by, and this is actually one of the things that I'm going to be mentioning in the newsletter.
Hmm.
Having been here, I've been forced to speak more German than I have within the time I've been in Germany because here everybody says usually when I start having a conversation, it goes especially English. Basically, do you speak English? Because once the person says yes, I just start speaking English. But here, whenever I say expressions in English, all I get is nine. And I'm like, okay. So it has forced me to really practice my German more than I used to. And I work to the official language is German. So you get
Hmm.
instructions in German. I may not be able to respond back in German, but I get my instructions and everything in the German language. So it's been very interesting. Yeah.
I
So
can't
I
even
think
imagine trying to pick up a new language as an adult. Yeah, and I mean, I watch a lot of foreign films, so I've watched a couple German films and Austrian films, and they speak German, and I'm like, I feel like you have to be born in Germany to like properly get the German accent and like their guttural words because time. Or like, yeah, just
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, is this a word or a sentence?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see what you mean, but also at my new workplace, a very international organization, a lot of foreigners work there. And I keep on asking, like the Cameroonian, he speaks French, he speaks
Mm-hmm.
English, understands Nigerian pidgin. Of course, you know, Cameroon borders Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
So he's part of Cameroon Brothers Cross River. So he was used to go to Cross River a lot. So he speaks Nigerian pidgin, and he speaks German. And the first time I met him, I was like, how long have you learned this language? He was like, his response, I'm still learning, which
Mm.
makes sense. But I've seen him say things I know. If I'm supposed to communicate that, there's no way I
Mm-hmm.
was going to achieve it.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one. I have colleagues who their primary language is Arabic, but
Mm-hmm.
they speak German. Of course, to be fair, because I'm a very observant person. There are times I've heard sentences, I'm like, this sentence is not correct. I'm the one that can't speak German fluently.
Mm-hmm.
They can't speak more fluently than they have a better command of German. But I say yes, and I'm like, no, this sentence is not correct. But of course,
Yeah.
that's how every language is. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth, most important I'm learning again from working with them is, do the people you're speaking to understand you? So long
Right.
as there is communication at the end of the day, I think that serves the purpose of your attempt. Even if you have um, you've misplaced your tenses,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not an exam.
Right.
And I think so to be fair, I think it's hard a language, but of course I think it's just the same way of learning a language as an adult. It's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But practice makes perfect. And I'm glad
Mm-hmm.
to have the opportunity of practicing more
Mm-hmm.
and nearly biting my tongue. And then there was something I said to someone today, and after I was done, I remember the sentence was not correct. And I'm like, what? She understood me. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go back and correct myself, but I was like, nah, Victor, let it slide, let it slide.
I guess a lot of Germans will appreciate that you're at least trying. And I think just people want to see you try, you know? And like you said,
Yeah,
as long as your point has been communicated, like people speak
yeah,
broken English all the time and you understand what they're trying to say. So that's the
true.
point. Just try, you know?
True. And that would take me to what I was saying last episode. Usually my episode I've dropped last week, but I didn't because again, the relocation, because we were supposed to record earlier than this, the
Yes.
relocation, settling at my new job and everything. But hopefully it's not going to be, I'm going to be consistent again.
Mm-hmm.
So without dwelling so much on it, I'm going to ask a question I also ask almost everybody that has come. I think everybody actually, how did your journey to Canada
Toronto.
start?
Toronto. Well, I came as a student. It couldn't get any simpler than that. I came straight
Okay.
after secondary school. So I did secondary school in Nigeria, of course. And I pretty much came here for undergrad, which was in '09. And so I've stuck around since then. And back then it was so much easier. It was so, I couldn't, like, I can't stress enough how much easier it was to come at the time. Because I don't think Canada opened, I don't think people cared, like Nigerians, I'll speak from a Nigerian perspective. I don't think Nigerians cared much about Canada. Back then, most of my mates were going to England or US. So,
Yeah.
but Canada then was a lot cheaper than those two options. And they also had free healthcare. And I knew I needed that because I'm asthmatic. So it
Okay.
would be nice to be in a place where if I, have an asthma attack or I fall ill, I'm not slapped with like a medical expense bill I couldn't afford. Um,
Yeah.
so that was one of the selling points for my dad at the time. And it was almost like an easier transition between completing school and becoming a permanent resident and becoming a Canadian citizen, as opposed to the other countries. You have to have gotten a job and then the job files for you to stay. But here, like you were pretty much guaranteed once you're done school, you get a 3-year work permit. And then within those 3 years, you apply for your residency. And then 2 years within 5 years, you're due for a passport. So that was one of so yeah, it was pretty easy. I don't know what the immigration process is like now because I've been way out of it. I know a lot of Nigerians have moved to Canada between the past 2 5 years.
Yeah,
It's a very popular destination now, and I love to see Nigerians here. Um, I think it used to be easy, but now I think they're cracking down on immigration.
yeah,
Like the government, they're trying to reduce the amount of foreigners or
yeah.
immigrants, new immigrants coming now. So yeah, I really can't speak to that, but my process was pretty easy 15 years ago.
All right. Now, I think off of that, I have a few questions I want to ask. First of
Yeah.
all, you mentioned you are asthmatic. So I'm going to ask this because I have a friend who's also asthmatic, and he says that he used to live in the United States. So when
Mhm.
he came back to Nigeria, it's like it got worse because of the air and stuff like that. And he believes that once he leaves the country, it's kind of almost like chance of having an attack drops from 100 to like 10. So I'm going to ask you from your experience, did you think, did things get better when you moved or,
Oh, 110%. I've only
okay,
had in Nigeria, I had an asthmatic attack like once every month. Like I literally needed to be in the hospital for it to go. But here I only had an attack once where I needed medical intervention in the past 15 years. I mean, I still use my inhalers here and there, of course. But my lifestyle is my asthma, my lungs, because the air is much cleaner. And again, I live in Toronto, which is like the dirtiest part of like the dirtiest city because it's like a
yeah,
lot of us are here, right? I live in the city, like it's like living in Lagos. That's like the
yeah,
equivalent, right? But it's clean. Like the air is cleaner than what Nigeria was. So even me going back normally, I'm always at like a 50% because I'm not breathing properly. Like even now in my adult age, going back home, I can tell the difference between the air quality and how it
yeah.
affects my lungs, and I can barely walk up the stairs without using my inhaler. So yeah.
And sorry, home here, when you say going back home, do you mean Lagos or any part of
Oh,
Nigeria
Lagos,
generally?
Lagos. I was raised, well, not born in Lagos, but I grew up in Lagos. Yeah,
Okay, because I mean the air in Lagos, it's bad.
it's
Even
horrible,
everywhere, like you know how you
horrible.
move from Lagos, once you see welcome to whatever state you're going to, I think Ogun
Hmm.
State, yeah, the air changes.
Yes.
And you know, it gets over because I stayed in Lagos after my studies, I stayed in Lagos for like 3 years.
Hmm.
Not up to 3 years, but except for in 3 years, but within that 3 years, I had like a year or about 2 years where I didn't travel out of Lagos.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize how I got so used to the bad air that
Hmm.
once I left Lagos and I took in a fresher breath, and I'm like,
Huh.
what?
What have I been breathing all along?
And it seems very significant, but it's not.
Hmm.
It's very clear. It's not one of, you don't need to be very observant to be able to notice that change. And talk
No,
about
I
the
feel like
noise thing too. It's like,
once you land, like that humidity and just everything just like hits you. And I've never really experienced it here because I feel like my best capacity health wise here than in Lagos. But then again, I went to school in Olashere, so I went to school in Osun State, and
yeah,
my asthma was much better. Like every time I went to the east, my village, because I'm Igbo, every time I went
yeah,
to the east, the air is a lot more cleaner in the villages, of course. Um, but again, my home is in Lagos, so I spent like 50% of my life there when I'm not in school. So yeah, it was just horrible. I honestly, I don't like going back home just because of that. Because I know
I
like
can
I will never be
imagine.
at full capacity. I'm literally operating at 50%. And that's because I have my steroid inhaler and my rescue inhaler. I cannot go
Yeah,
home without both inhalers.
I can imagine. And I know I didn't want us to dwell so much on it was supposed to be like a health conversation, but I
Right.
think it's also very important that we talk about it. And I'm going to ask, like, first of all, the first time you had to go home after you moved to Canada, how long did you stay in Canada before the first time you moved home? And then since going back to Nigeria and realizing, of course, the quality of air is not as good as what you have in Canada, what kind of preparations do you often make whenever you have to go to Nigeria to just make sure that there are no incidents?
Honestly, I don't do too much. As long as I have my inhaler, which is basically what I make sure to have with me. And then a
Hmm?
lot of prepping to Nigeria is just buying stuff for people. So that's
Okay.
what basically my entire suitcase is buying things for friends and family, mostly family. But other than that, I can't think of any like activities or things I do prior to departure. Is
Hmm?
I treat it like every other routine trip. So yeah, but yeah, I can't think of anything to be honest.
Okay, fair enough. And then back to moving to Canada because you moved after secondary school. So I imagine
Yeah,
you're like between 17 and 19.
yeah, I was
So
thinking.
usually, of course, you know how Nigerian parents are. They always make the decisions. Even when you're not exactly in agreement, you just have to do what they want you to do.
Right.
So I'm going to ask, at that point, was moving to Canada your idea, or was it just one of those things? Popsy said, Momsy said, we have to go to Canada, and you're like, I don't have a choice, or maybe okay, but or maybe they said that you're like, okay, that's a good thing, I have to do it. So how was it at that point?
It was my idea because my older sister was in England, so I thought I was gonna go like to England because I had a sister there. But a friend, quote and unquote, was coming to Canada, and I'm like, you can, and I'm like, oh, daddy, have you considered? Have you,
Okay.
have you considered Canada as an option? So he looked into it, and Canadian the exchange rate was so much better than converting
Yeah.
naira to pounds or converting naira to USD. And so he was like, "Oh, okay, well, since you want to go and you're going to save
I
me a
might as
ton
well
of
save some
money,"
money.
and like everything just checked out, like
Yeah.
currency, cost of tuition, cost of housing, health, like I said. So yeah, and he was like, okay, well, let's look into it and explore that option. And it worked out.
Okay. As an aside, the friend that was moving to Canada, are you guys still friends?
Nah, we don't even talk anymore.
Okay.
We went to the same uni, but now we don't. I don't even know where. I don't know where it is. I don't have his number.
Oh my God, the laugh you laughed when you mentioned
maybe,
that friend, I was like, okay, this is serious.
maybe, maybe he was. Maybe his purpose in my life was just to open the
Open your
window
eyes
of
to a
Canada to
better
me.
opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I count it as a blessing, regardless.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
So now you've moved to Canada as a teenager.
Yeah.
At what point did it hit you that, okay, first of all, I'm not responsible for myself and miles away from home? That I mean, of course, I schooled in Unizik. I
Mm.
was 2 hours away from home. Sure, you
Mm.
get. At some point, if I didn't want to go home, there was always that person that I could call on. I get this guy I knew that I was. It felt like I was because I grew up in Oka,
Mhm.
but it felt like I was just close to help whenever I needed, even though I
Mm.
was in the university. But I imagine that if it had felt that distant, I'm going to have a different experience of my university. I don't know if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
you finished secondary school, you left your friends, you left your family, and you traveled to a new country altogether. At what point did it hit you, wow, wow, this is what I've done, and how heavy this decision has been, and how did you start to adjust to that?
I think basically all my life, I think my parents prepared us for that exit because, like, we did all went to boarding school right from JS1. So, and I went to Ocean State. So, for a lot of the time, I've been away from home since I was 11. Um, I don't even think it ever hit me, to be honest, because because my sister did it. So I just kind of prepared mentally. I knew I was going to leave the country for like I stayed at home for a year before
Okay.
like a, what would I call it, gap year,
Yeah,
before
gap year.
moving. So I just was mentally ready. All my friends from secondary school had all gone abroad, so they were all in America or in England. So I just assumed I just was ready for that move. And my move was also easier because I didn't go straight to uni. I did undergrad. Sorry, I did like a pre-university. like an international secondary school. So basically grade 12 again. And a lot
Yeah.
of the students there were Nigerians and international students. So it was an easier transition, I would say, because now a lot of my friends are still Nigerians. So it
Yeah.
wasn't too much of I wasn't just dumped into the pool of Oyibo people. And I'm like, oh my God, how will I navigate having conversation? Um, but I was still with like Nigerian students in a Nigerian school for 1 year,
Yeah.
and all of us ended up going to the same university. I don't know if
University.
that's
So
good
you
or
kind of
bad.
had some contacts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had some contacts. I don't know if I would recommend going to school with your friends or like other Nigerians. You might want to branch out to meet other people. But it was very, very easy, I would say. I missed home, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I want to go back to Lagos now. I miss my family. I miss that. Not quite,
Yeah.
because again, we were prepared for this. We were ready. We just expected it. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I didn't go to a boarding school, and I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
But of course, I think drawing from that, when you're used to already leaving home
Hmm.
like you said, at 11, it makes it easier because it's like, even though you love home, you've always also not been a part of it, sort of. So it's like something you're
Yeah.
accustomed to. And yeah, I think that kind of also helps to weed one off from missing their parents and all of that. But you
Hmm.
said something about still missing home. I remember there was a time it was one of the episodes last year. I mentioned that when I miss Nigeria, I miss more of the environment than I miss the people. My sister called me.
Mm.
Like, what the fuck do you mean? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And I'm going to ask you, so when you miss home, is it because I think home is not just the people, home is
Mm.
the vibe, home is the air, even though
Hmm.
it's pollutes, home is the food, home is a lot of things for a lot of people. So when you look at missing Nigeria, what does it mean to you? Is it more the people? Is it more the
Oh,
environment, or
100% the
is
people.
everything? Okay.
100%, 100%. Because I never really got to experience Nigeria as an adult.
Okay, yeah.
So I think if I did uni there and I built up a community in Nigeria, because like I literally have not a lot of friends in Nigeria now, right? So my home was my mom and dad and my siblings,
Yeah,
but now all
okay.
my siblings are abroad. Um, so my mom is not even longer in Nigeria, so like there's nothing for me to go and do in Nigeria if I went home.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really and truly just my mom and dad and my siblings at the time, but like they're all in North America or England now. So if my mom's not there, I don't miss anything, to be honest. I don't, that's sad, but it's just I've been
Yeah.
away for so long now, and I'm like, there's nothing for me there apart from my mom. And yeah, my dad's late now, just because I said my mom. But just to be clear, I also miss my dad, but he's
Yeah.
not with us anymore. But yeah, it was the people, 100%.
Right. Sorry about the loss of your father. But okay, now I think that makes sense, and I totally understand it because these are the people you left behind. Like you said, you don't have much friends, and some of your friends traveled around the time you also traveled.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to, how do I phrase this? It's you know how when you live in someone's country, do you ever have a moment where you feel like I'm Canadian, or are you still dangling between? Maybe I'm not really can, even though I have the citizenship, which I believe you do, but
Hmm.
maybe I'm not really from here. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's okay to just know that you're an in-betweener. Like, I
Okay.
might not be a native Canadian, but is a Canadian really native Canadians? Because they did have like the Métis and the Inuits, and
Yeah.
technically, they were native Canadians that aren't Canadians, right? But I'm okay with that middle ground of like I'm Nigerian and Canadian. I understand how to adapt myself whichever way I see fit. Maybe even now more so Canadian because my mentality is a lot more like my foundational years. I have spent a lot of
Yeah.
my knowledge base here. So
Yeah.
sometimes my mom is like, "So the way you think you need to change, you need to change." this, I don't
You
know
need
why
to
I
make
said
it more Nigerian, please.
I don't know why I said I think the way I navigate life is very,
Yeah.
very like Western Canadian in a sense.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day, I still embrace Nigerian food. I still embrace Nigerian culture. I still listen to Afrobeats. I still try to speak Igbo most of the time. And I think
Yeah,
there's beauty in that, like blending those two cultures. Um, and I've just come to accept it as what it is. And that's what will always be. Because I can, even when I go to Nigeria and talk to like Nigerians that maybe have never been abroad, like they would never really truly get me. And then even when
true,
I stay here and speak to like Canadians, they will never truly get me. So I'm just like,
true.
okay, well, I meet my fellow diasporans and a lot of them will get me. So there's another culture that we've kind of established as Africans or Nigerians in Canada or Nigerians in the diaspora. So, and I'm okay.
True.
I'm okay with the new culture we're forming, to be honest. So
Yeah, I
it is
think I
what
think
it
I
is.
think I
Mhm.
took I remember the person I asked someone a similar question. I think the person was is lives in London. And she
Mm,
was like, she also said, just like you, that it's okay to basically not feel like a London girl, even though she's
mhm,
been in London for a particular time. I also asked a friend of mine who has been to, he moved from Nigeria to Qatar and then to
mhm,
China. Now he's in Germany. So I remember
mhm,
asking him about where he feels like home is, and clearly he doesn't have a particular route because within this time, I mean, around the same time he left, but then within the space of why you've been in Canada for 15 years, he's been in three countries within this timeline. So it's like, where is it that it's home? I think on
mm,
one hand, it's kind of sad, at least especially in his own case, where it's like you've been
mhm.
flying around and you're not
Yeah.
easily rooted, but also it's one of those things that we don't have any control over, and we might as well just accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
Because I've not lived out of the country like as much as you have, but I'm very aware that if I go back to Nigeria, I'm going to be stressed, especially if I go to Lagos. I keep telling everybody that cares that if I visit Nigeria, I'm going to visit Lagos because I have friends. But if
Mhm.
not, I wouldn't want to touch Lagos because moving from Lagos, where you stay in traffic for hours on end, to come into a country where everywhere is 15 minutes away, even on bus and everything,
Mhm.
it's like, if I go back to
Mhm.
Lagos, I'm going to lose my mind because why am
Yep.
I stuck here?
Yep.
Plus the air, plus
Yep.
everything. And I don't say it to spite Lagos. It's just the fact that I've been removed from that environment
For so
for a
long.
long time. Yeah, and it's not even up to 10 years, not even up to, it's been just 2 years or thereabout.
Mhm.
And the longer I stay here, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And I always say people always ask me like, "Oh, when you moved to Canada, what was the biggest culture shock for you?" And I'm like, "I was more culture shocked going back home to
Now you tell me more about that because I was going to talk about culture shock, but let's talk about that.
I think because we are so exposed to like Western media that
Yeah,
and again I traveled abroad when I was younger, so I was so
yeah,
exposed to like all my films were like American. So I kind of knew what to expect. But
yeah,
you don't know, I don't know how to say it. You know when you've been living, I don't want to say a nightmare, but for lack of a better word, when you've been living a
yeah.
nightmare for so long and you finally wake up, oh my God, that was such a dream. I remember the first time I came back to Nigeria after I was in
Yeah.
uni. I was away for 3 years and then came home. And then just the smell, I'm like, oh my God, why is it so loud? Oh my God, now I know why we speak so loudly. Everything is so loud. You have to shout to get your point across. Um, well, I don't remember being like culture shocked here, as opposed to we say certain words differently, and maybe my
Yeah.
accent and their accent. But no, I was like, oh, okay, this takes some getting used to. How are the horns and
The nice thing you mentioned, I remember something. I'm going to tell a story. So, because I started my program in Nigeria before I
Mm,
traveled, so I was doing a group task.
mhm,
I was in my house in a
mhm.
meeting, and then you hear trailer. The horns will just, I'm like, okay. Then you hear one somebody was like, Victor, where are you?
Yeah,
Why is it so loud where
and you're
you
in your
are? I'm like,
house.
I'm in my house. I was
Yeah.
like, but then we could hear, I'm like, yes, because that's the way the roads are built.
Mhm.
Another time I was still in the same group doing a meeting. Guess what I could hear from the meeting?
What?
Sound from a church. I think
Like,
it was it Mountain of Fire? Basically, the next compound was a church. So
mhm,
this is me. I have come back from work. I said, let's do this meeting in the evening because I have to go to work. I had a job at the time. So I got back to work, quickly had I can't remember if I had my shower. I jumped on the meeting. And then church evening service around January. That moment where churches do like 20 days, weeks of fasting. So
Mm-hmm.
it was another evening, and then they were singing, and I was there like, oh, not again. And the thing is, like, my problem with that particular church is that they don't know how to sing. It's not one of those churches where the choir is doing such a wonderful
And
job.
be the
No,
loudest. Mm-hmm.
everybody's singing off key in the choir. I don't know how to sing. So
Mm.
when I tell that I can tell that someone can sing badly, that means the person has to
You
be
know.
very bad.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh God. And at this point, they've gotten used to not complaining about the meetings. It was
Mm-hmm.
so embarrassing. Even though nobody said anything that day, but I was there
Mm-hmm.
like,
Oh my
God,
goodness.
can someone take me out of this place? And these are some of the things you hear on a regular. It's because you get accustomed to it in Nigeria. You're
You
looking for an
do. It becomes
apartment. You're
white noise.
wondering, is there a church close? Is
Yeah.
there a more funny enough? I lived in between a church and a mosque, but thankfully the mosque never disturbed me. During my meet was a church that disturbed me.
Yeah.
But these are the things that you have to look out for.
Mm.
Is there a church close by? Is there a school close by? If it's a church, what kind of church? Because the noise from a celestial church is different from the noise from a Pentecostal church.
Or a
It's not
Catholic church.
different from the
Yeah.
noise from a Catholic church. It's
Mm-hmm.
like these are things you learn without even knowing that you're learning them
Mm.
until when you
Mm-hmm.
actually start looking for a house. Because
And
if I
like,
was
okay.
one that found, I wouldn't have lived there. I moved in with a friend. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it was cheaper for me. Let's do this. But I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't ordinarily move to a place that is basically
Between the
serving
church and the
between a
mosque.
church and a mosque. Because in the morning you wake up to the sound because the mosque, their own is in the morning. You hear that
Mm.
bell, and I'm like, God, I mean, good. Thank God I worked in a bank, so I woke up early.
Mm.
Otherwise, maybe they would have been waking me up. I had a friend, and if I visit him, we often wake up to the sound of the school singing their national anthem or
Oh,
all those things nursery schools sing. And
oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness. Uh,
ah,
It disturbs
and
your
then
peace.
it disturbs my
No, but you
peace.
don't realize how loud it is until you leave and you come
You
back.
don't,
Like
you
it's like
don't.
I'm like now I understand why we speak so loudly. Now I understand. Now I
Because you're
get it.
trying to get ahead of the noise, exactly.
Yes, yes.
Once I was speaking to a friend on the phone, and he goes, "Why is your house so quiet?" I mean, he's in Nigeria.
Mm.
I'm like, "What do you mean?" He was like, "I can't hear anything." I'm like, "Because there's nothing for
There's
you to
nothing to, yeah.
hear."
Mm-hmm.
And funny thing, so this person traveled about months after this conversation, traveled abroad for an event,
Mm-hmm.
and he calls me and he goes, "Now I understand why every time I call you, everywhere is quiet."
Quiet. It's like in a sense, right? I wish there was a nice balance between how quiet it can get and how loud Nigeria,
Yeah,
Lagos. Let me not say Nigeria. How loud Lagos is, because sometimes it does get quite lonely abroad. Because
yeah,
I feel like a lot of the time, maybe you don't even need people in your space, but just knowing that there's life being lived around you, and you know
true.
you have these little interactions here and there once you just step out of your gate. But literally, you know who your neighbors are. Like, you, I literally lived 10 years in a place I didn't know my neighbors. so, so like you see them, hello, hi. It was like literally my last year we became friends. And that
Yeah.
was because of the pandemic. Like the pandemic forced us in the same space, and then, but
Yeah.
prior to that, it was go to work, come home, lock yourself inside. So I wish there was. I wish Nigeria could just somehow become a little bit more Lagos. I keep saying Nigeria. Sorry, people will like just become like just a little bit quieter. Just for peace of mind and health reasons and meditative reasons. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I get it. And the thing about neighbors, I don't know my neighbors. I mean, I would say because I've been here newly. But even when I was not here, like the place I live, I don't, sometimes I meet people on the street, we don't greet each other. That would not
Yeah.
happen in Nigeria. If you
In
don't meet
Canada,
the
it's
person will
different.
greet you.
In Canada, it's different. Um, they are very Canadians are very nice and very polite.
Okay.
And so if they know that they've seen you and you live in the same place, they would usually say it.
Okay.
It's always like water cooler. Oh, hello, hi. Oh, nice weather. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Smile. Bye bye. So yes, you have those like very superficial conversations with like neighbors and places that you frequent mostly. But nothing deeper than, oh, let's go and have a drink, or let's go and, let's just go for a stroll. It's
Yeah.
only, but you have to be very intentional, because I also find that a lot of them are also kind of isolated and they don't mind reaching out. They just don't know how to. So you might want to take it upon yourself to initiate those little, like, okay, do you want to do this?
Conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, Canadians are different. Like, they're very nice people. Like, I can't tell you how many times Canadians have come to my rescue, especially during my college years of, being a little, what's the word, out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll make sure you get home. They'll, like, oh, I remember one time I was sick for drinking too much. And like, oh my God, give her bananas, give her, So yeah, they will come to your rescue. They'll come to your aid when you need them to come. But that's about the limit of their interaction is, oh, hello, hi, bye, So.
Yeah, I wouldn't, Germans are nice too. They would do things for you, but also the fact that it's like they still pull back. So it's like, yes, you're if it calls for it, I'm going to show up for you. But after
Mm,
that, they pull back. And for me, it's also just as you mentioned about how they may want to reach out, but they're not sure how to.
mm-hmm,
Also, for me, I think sometimes also in that station, I'm like, will I be crossing a boundary if I do this?
mm,
Because like Igbo people would say, is it Igbo people? Yes. When a how they say it, ọkụkọ ji ebe ọmara o were ofu okwukwo, or something like that.
mm-hmm,
Basically,
mm-hmm,
for those who don't understand Igbo, when a hen or a chicken, cock, whatever, gets a place it's not familiar with, it stands on one leg, something like that. That's
mm-hmm,
basically the literal translation. So it's like, I'm here, I'm new here, I'm trying to observe, and I'm observing that people don't talk to each other. You don't expect me to go and become the blabbermouth, hi,
Oh
hello. It's
no,
going to be like,
yeah,
but interestingly, like I said, I moved to a new city. People here say hello. And whenever it's the first time someone said, I'm like, okay. It took me
But you
as
said
a
it's a small,
shocker.
but you said
And I responded,
it's a small town, right?
yes,
It's a small city. Maybe
yeah.
that's why. Maybe everybody's
So they
so.
say hello in a way that nobody did. Nobody sees me across the street where I used to live and say hello. But here,
Mm,
people, I've never met them before, and they say hello. I will say hello back. But like I said, once you've said the hello, would you go ahead and say, how are you? Do you go ahead and say, can you? Basically, that's the thing. So it's like, we know
yeah.
Nigerians are supposedly big mouthed, but then
Mm,
even when you bring your big mouth, you don't want to be that big mouth that basically ruins everything for everybody because you've now took your mouth into everybody's
everywhere.
conversation
Yeah.
and everywhere because you're trying to be friendly. So it's
Mm,
like, how does one find the middle ground between reaching out to these people without having them feel that you've invaded their spaces in a
mm-hmm,
way that is welcoming enough for them to receive you without
mm-hmm.
really going over their boundary. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense. What I would recommend is coffee is a very neutral. Is a cafes. It's a very
Yeah.
neutral offer, right? So I wouldn't maybe offer it like maybe the first time I'm meeting you, of course. But if
Okay.
I know we stay in the same place, or I've seen you around, and I'll just say hello, hi the first couple weeks, and then slowly you build up more conversation, build up, and like, oh, do you want to go have coffee sometime? But then again, this is, I don't know how it would now be if it's a woman asking a woman. I'm talking primarily from the perspective of me asking another female, um,
Yeah.
just based off of like friendliness, because I don't know how to now
Yeah.
navigate it when, oh, are they asking me out because they like me, or for friendship purposes, is a woman
Yeah.
asking a woman. Um, I just like, oh yeah, we can go have coffee sometime, and then I initiate like, oh, do you want to go have coffee sometime on this day? Because another polite way for Canadians to end the conversation is, oh, let's grab coffee, but that coffee is never happening. It's just, I didn't know.
Yeah.
This was one of my, okay, I guess this is a culture shock for me that when a Canadian says, oh, we should have coffee sometime without actually
Yeah.
saying when
It's
and where,
politeness. Yeah.
it's just a polite way for them to exit the conversation. But let's have coffee sometime, and then you have a date or you have a plan or you maybe talk about something that both of you basically liked.
Are
Be like, oh,
interested
like
in,
an
yeah.
interest that both of you have established that, oh, we both like, oh, maybe it's live concerts, for example. You like the same artist, like, oh, do you want to go check out this band with me? Or do you want to go grab coffee here? Or like, and do you want to go check out the neighborhood? Um,
Yeah.
and again, you just I guess, use common sense. If they're not replying or they're not, as forthcoming as you would like them to be, then you just, it's what it is. It's no hard feelings. Um, because if you don't have any friends, you want to try to make friends, you look toward people that are always going to be around you. You have to frequent the same spots, right? So you win some, you lose some. And there's no harm in trying that. I feel like as long as you're polite in your approach and you're
Yeah.
nice, you're not like loud, because I think Germans are quite reserved. Canadians too
Yeah.
are pretty reserved as well. But just be human. Just be like you know, just approach like a sensible person. I don't know how else to
Fair
put it.
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But just remember, actually, someone I considered a friend had told
Mm,
me they were going to do, I think they were traveling or something. They told me they were going to do something. And as by a friend, I checked in, hi, how have you been? XYZ, you mentioned blah, 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 blah. How did it go? This
mm,
person goes, but I'm fine. Give me update. And then goes, but why was I asking? And I remember being shocked.
mm,
You know how you don't expect it from a friend,
mm-hmm,
because you mentioned something. When I say friend, at least this person I've never gone to his house, but I've gone to where he works. He has visited my house. Basically, we've hung out. And if I had issues, it's one of those people I'm going to like think
cool.
of to call, and he would
Yeah.
come through. So you just mentioned sometimes, okay, the right thing to do is check in. And when he asked me why, I was in a German class. I remember this is one of those things you don't forget. And I saw
Mm-hmm,
my face say why. I'm like, from the preview, I'm like, why came in?
mm-hmm.
Why what? And also he answered, but he not said, but why? He
Why are you
asked me why.
asking?
I'm like,
Yeah. Maybe, I guess
I
maybe they
remember,
just
I remember
figured. Mhm.
thinking, okay, first of all, because I thought as friends, I was supposed to ask. I'm
I
just
don't think
checking
there's
in on
anything wrong with
you.
asking. Yeah, I don't think
Yes,
there's anything
and
wrong. Because sometimes I would ask, even as a Nigerian, if you ask me, oh, how did this go, blah blah blah, I might ask, depending on the situation, oh, why are you asking? Do you need me to, like, is there a follow up to this or
no, but I
not?
think if because if I tell you I'm doing something, you're my friend, I expect you to
Mm.
ask me about it. Not necessarily because you
Oh,
care, but just
yeah,
because you're my friend, you know this is
right.
important to me. You just have to ask, and that's exactly what I was doing. I wasn't trying
Mm-hmm.
to make any plans for drinks because if I wanted to, could have gone for drinks. Just simple. He said he was going to do this, and days have passed. I just wanted to know what's the updates. Did he do it? Was
Mm-hmm.
it something I could help with if there is that kind of thing?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
question
I
took
feel
me
like
off
no,
guard.
I think you're rather unique in that approach though, because I think there's only
Yeah,
one person that I know that follows up on when I say I'm doing something and they're like, oh, how did
yeah.
this go? For the most part, most people don't. So maybe that's what took him. That's
Yeah,
what took
maybe
him.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I
Mm,
think because I never thought about it from that
mm,
perspective. I just was like, and for me, it made me, I pulled back in such a way that if I'm doing a gym and they tell me anything, I don't try to
to
go
follow
for
up on it.
updates because
Yeah.
it's like, let me make them not ask me why again because once
But I
bitten,
don't
twice
think he meant
shy.
why in a bad. I don't think he meant
Not,
why
to be
as
fair,
far
I don't think
as
it did
maybe.
nothing change.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't think he's a bad person. I just thought it was a
Mm-hmm.
very German thing to do, you get. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't affect our friendship. We've been friends ever. This
Mm-hmm.
happened months ago, and we've hung out even after
Mm-hmm.
that. He's even come through for me when I did something after that. So I don't think he was being shady, but just that's
Sorry.
did
Do
I
you
cross the
think
line
Do you think that
kind of
conversation would
thing?
have been different if it took place in person as opposed to over phone, over text messages?
I don't think it would have been different because if it's really a physical conversation, it would have still been me saying, would you want to meet? And usually I think if you ask if they want to meet, they would ask maybe there's why. Not because why in the context of there's a problem, why you
Mhm.
want to meet, or just want to meet to drink. I think that would have been it. And then I don't think it would have been different if it was I think if I had asked him face to face, maybe you'd have said the same thing. But
Yeah.
just that shock, because it has never happened in my life where I checked on somebody and they asked me why.
Why are
So
you
it's like,
checking on me?
yes, and I'm like, but I don't think he was being shady, I have
No,
to say,
I honestly
because
don't read it that way. I think he
yeah,
was probably expecting that you're asking that question because there was a follow up to your question. So, like, okay,
yeah,
everything has gone. Why are you asking? You know, is there something else you want to add to this? I don't think it was a
yeah,
shady thing. It's just
yeah,
maybe they're
I
just
think.
not used to. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a different perspective. But I did it because I thought this is what I do for my friends. If a friend tells me
yeah.
they're doing something like sounds important to them, I'm
Mm.
going to go back and ask.
You're very
Just
unique. Just take it
because.
that way. Because I have
Okay,
plenty of friends
thank
that
you.
wouldn't. That wouldn't follow. Except like if I now meet you again in person, like, oh yeah, how did that thing that you mentioned go? But like for me to like reach out
No,
specifically, yeah,
I
it's
reach out
different.
for specific
It's unique.
things,
Yeah.
basically. If I, as long as I think we are close enough and whatever sounds important to you. You know, there's a difference between just normal gist, just say you're going to do X, Y, Z, it's not that
Mm-hmm.
deep. And there's this one you say, and I think this is important. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to like, okay, what's up? How did it go? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
That's
I
fair.
think that's what we should do for our friends.
Yeah.
Now, I think we started having a conversation after you made it I saw a post you did on Instagram where you mentioned someone was struggling to pronounce your name. I was trying to suggest how they would pronounce your name. I don't know if you remember that
I remember the
video.
post. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when I reached out to you because it's a conversation people have a lot about names,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very sensitive thing because names are important to people. I'm going to ask you, how did that interaction make you feel? And is this something that happens often? And what informed your decision about how you handled it?
So just to give some backstory to the
Mhm.
audience or the listeners is I was working in an insurance company at the time and I had called a client to follow up on some documents. So the wife, I was speaking to the wife, said, oh, her husband sent it in to me. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't get it. So can you ask your husband who he sent the documents to? And then the husband goes, I sent it to the girl with the stupid name. Yes. so, so basically calling my name Chisom stupid.
Yeah,
And yeah, so at the time, again, I was working in a professional setting. I couldn't escalate things. Like the client is always right. And I had never had such an interaction before in my entire life. And I had been in
yeah,
Canada for 6 years at the time. And that was the first time that I've seen like blatant disrespect for African names and Nigerian names. I honestly didn't know how to react. And so I was also dealing with somebody on the phone as well because the wife was also like super apologetic. She wasn't expecting her husband to, say something so
say something
atrocious.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah, so she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And like at this point, what would I have done? When
yeah,
I don't know how to react, I freeze. So basically, I froze, ended the call, and I'm like, "Damn!" Like, I mean, in hindsight, it's always like, oh, I should have said this or done this, but like, I
yeah.
that was literally where the conversation ended, and now I just look back at it as, you know what, it's a story I said.
One of those things. Yeah.
It's one of those things that happened to me. And I make it a point to always say my name where I am. It's Chisom.
Okay.
And now what I also realized was even in my social media, I say my name a lot now, so that
Okay.
people like when people that are not Nigerians or are not familiar with Nigerian names see my video, they know how to pronounce Chisom, or they at least
Yeah.
try, there's no, how do I pronounce your name? I constantly always say my name in my video, most videos.
Yeah.
So it's just a tip I use. And I mean, I was flustered as well, but I didn't
Yeah.
react. There was no drama. It was just, you know what? I could either be here and be angry and waste all my energy, or I could just, keep it pushing because that's one person out of how many millions of people that have been an asshole,
Interacted
for lack of
with.
a better
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. But also because that's I can't imagine how you must have felt. And I say this because I worked in sales before.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, calling customers for whatever reason, I would rather not.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine calling a customer and you're trying to be professional and you hear something like that. it's definitely something that would put anybody off, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
professional you try to be. I mean, you might be professional enough not to have said something, but I know a lot of people would have been out of hung up, even with their moments of apology. There's no way. Because if I do not hang up immediately, I may end up saying things that would
Yeah,
get me
yeah.
fired, and I wouldn't want to be fired, that kind of thing. But I'm also going to ask, aside that incident, have you had incidents of maybe mispronouncing your name, and how do you feel any type of way when it happens? Because I'm going to ask this question because I've seen interactions on Twitter, for instance, where
Mm,
people consider it microaggression when your name is not pronounced correctly, when people think it's an intentional intent to minimize or be racist and things like
mm.
that. I'm not going to say anything in defense of or against any of those opinions, but I'm just going to ask, as an individual, how does that make you feel when maybe people mispronounce your name, or even after you've told them correctly several times, or just generally when they mispronounce your name?
I went to Yoruba school. You know, maybe I
Mhm.
butchered.
You
You know,
get because
you know, you go back to me. You know how many Nigerians? Chisom, Chisom, finesse. I'm like, they butchered my name straight from like. So at this point, when you've grown up with people just mispronouncing your name your entire time,
you just get
my
used to
entire
it.
life, you get used to it. I just so
You
what
just
I
get
do
used
now
to
is
it.
like, hello, who am I speaking with? Oh, it's Chisom, and I just spell it out for you immediately. You know, I'm like
Yeah,
Chisom, Chison. You know, it's Chisom, Chisom. I don't stay on. Some people will stay on the phone and make sure you pronounce it well. For me, I'm just like, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to bother myself with this. You know, this is like
yeah,
an interaction that maybe I'll probably never talk to you again in my life. You know, um, it doesn't really bother me because again, I went to Yoruba school. I grew up in
yeah,
Lagos. And I get it. I understand. I'm just like, you know what? Just try. As long as I see you try, you know, you're not
yeah,
being ignorant. You're not saying, oh, can I call you Chi or something else? As long as you're trying, I'm cool with that, you know? Just try. That's all I
yeah.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah, and I said this because, I mean, of course, because, conversation about racism is a bit different for, I wouldn't say, I don't think that when Nigerians are very versed in what racism conversations are because
Mhm.
we mostly grew up in a black country. But of
Right.
course, we are not entirely ignorant because some of this conversation I mentioned is mostly headed by black Americans or black Canadians or black Europeans. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like one of my older friends who grew up in the UK always said that I'm not very sensitive to racism. And I
Racism.
always remind him that I just came here yesterday. You've been here.
Mm-hmm.
You might understand a lot of some of those microaggressions. You might be a little more sensitive to these things than I am. Because for me, I'm still like, oh, okay, interesting. Basically bewildered, surprised, or just trying
Mm-hmm.
to understand what's going on. Or maybe even not even noticing anything going on. And I said this because, like, for me, like yourself, I didn't grow up in a Yoruba school, but of course, in Nigeria, the normal thing about NYC, the school
Mm-hmm.
I attended, core members always came, and whenever they did, they mispronounced my last name.
Mm.
My last name is Njoko. People have called me Ojuku. And
Ojuku.
then it's like, yes,
Ojuku.
yes.
From
So it's like
Ojuku.
they see the J and the O and the
Mm-hmm.
K, it automatically becomes Ojuku. And it's like, what am I going to do? Because who do you start telling? And this is like you said, you're not going to meet them. Okay, they are core members. But what 1 year they don't come out. And that sort of
Mm-hmm.
person will come and call you the same thing. Now I'm in Germany, only one person has pronounced my name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did, my last name rather, I asked him how he was able to do that. He said because he watched American football.
Mm.
And
And the same
I
player.
don't watch America. Yeah, there's a player
Yeah.
that has the name in joke. I had to Google to like, okay, who
Mm.
is this player? I can't remember the
Mm-hmm.
person's first name, but that's the person. I'm like, okay, there's a player that answers in joke. I'm like, okay, that's how he was able to realize the name, learn how to
Mm.
pronounce the name. So every other, because in German the J is pronounced as a Y. So
Mm.
the same way you say that when you say you, for instance, that sound you have is what you have when you say J. So instead of Njoko, they
Mm-hmm.
say Yoko. And I
Oh.
can't correct everybody. And I also would
Mm.
understand why anybody would think it's racist, but then these people don't even know the average German don't know that Nigerians that Nigerians speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, where do I start from? I understand they might be racist German, but I don't think anybody who is mispronouncing my name is doing that
He's
because they're
racist.
trying to be
Yeah. Yeah,
exactly,
or
they're not trying to
being
be microaggressive, they're
microaggressive
not trying to
or
be
yeah.
anything. I also would understand why anybody would feel that way, but I don't
Hmm.
think, with respect to my name, they're trying to be racist.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
instance you mentioned where they called your name a stupid name, it's a very intentional decision they made to be
exactly. That's
disrespectful.
totally different from
That's
the
totally
average person
different.
that's like, oh, Chisom, Chisom, like again, I just pick my battles.
Exactly.
I think to some aspects, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but like I just
Yeah.
navigate the world in a certain naive way. I don't look for microaggressions here and there, or you don't pronounce my name because I'm like, if you want to find something to be angry about, you find something to be angry about. And this one,
True.
and this one really and truly isn't worth my energy, my brain power.
Yeah.
There's so much more I can do, with my life and my emotion.
Yeah.
Um, could I have reacted better? Maybe. Could I have said something? Possibly. But these things always come after the fact. Those witty
Exactly. True.
responses. It doesn't
Yeah,
happen in the
true.
moment when it's not something that you're used to. Because again, the average person I've dealt with, most people I've dealt with, were really kind. They don't know how to pronounce it. They'll ask you how you pronounce it. Like, oh, that's a different name.
Yeah.
Where do you get it from? And then they give you, oh, is that Chisom? Japanese? Oh, Japanese. I'm like, no, Nigerian. so, so will I now like be offended because one person that's ignorant,
Yeah.
clearly, probably even becoming senile, like comment, So yeah, I don't stress too much about those things.
All right. So I think it's important we round up because the time has been fast spent, and you have a brand, Nri Nka. I got it
Mm-hmm.
correctly, right?
Yeah, Nri Nka,
So
yeah.
tell us about that and how it started, the idea behind it, and yeah.
So I'm a baker. My art form is baking and decorating cakes, but then I realized my passion was more between capturing the process of me making it. So I started to look at cakes as art in itself, as an experience, as creating something out of nothing. And I used to be called Bacon Bands, and I didn't want to limit myself to just baking. And when I was selecting a name, I'm like, I wanted something that was Igbo and like represents food and art. I mean, I
Yeah.
googled it too, and they said art in Igbo is Nka. I don't know if that's true,
I
but
think it's more of Nka, not
Nka,
Nka. Nka.
okay, Nka.
Yeah. It's
So,
Nka. So it's more like
um,
craft.
yeah, so that's also basically food art translate literally translated into
Yeah.
English. Because I was looking for a name that didn't, I guess, bottleneck me into just baking. Because I knew I wanted to be in food and I also liked art, so I sort of
Yeah.
merged the two. And it's been picking up lately, like with my storytelling. That guy that called my name stupid was like my first
Yeah.
semi-viral clip. So everything I think of now, oh, it's a story to tell. So every
Yeah.
experience. So yeah, so it's been picking up lately, and I'm pursuing like a social media food creation journey, and it's going well. So fingers crossed for
Yeah.
that. Mhm.
Okay. And this was tied your 9 to 5.
This my 9 to 5. No, I work in finance 9 to 5. So this is my
Okay.
passion project outside my 9 to 5. Once we become my 9 to 5.
So how do you manage your time doing a 9 to 5, having your passion project, and of course you mentioned you started volunteering recently.
Oh
How do you
yes.
manage all of that?
I work 9 to 5, but the good thing is I work remotely.
Okay.
So I can plan my hours between when my busy periods at work, focus on that. And then when work is quite down or slow, or immediately after work, I can jump into creation. And so like during my lunch break, I can use the opportunity to like do a couple things here and there. Wake up early. So I'm full-time remote, and that gives me the flexibility of managing my time. Volunteering is just on Wednesdays, once a week.
Okay.
So it's not too, for 2 hours, 6 to 8. It's not too
Yeah.
hard, or it's not something I cannot adjust into my schedule. And I just tend to use up my weekends quite wisely as well. So it's not easy, but it's doable. But again, I work remotely. If you work remotely, you realize that you can do a lot with your time.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. Fair enough. And I think you've I think this conversation has been very insightful, and I think it's also have been a fun conversation. But before we conclude, I would want to ask, what advice you'd give someone who is trying to move to Canada? I know, of course, the times have changed, but you've also
Mm-hmm.
lived there for about 15 years, so which
Yeah.
means more or less you know how things work.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
if someone is planning to come to Canada for studies or for work, what advice would you give them?
Um, I would I would just say keep an open mind. Like, don't expect the policies and the ideals that you had in Nigeria to translate here, because in Toronto, for example, is very multicultural, very liberal. You know, you get to meet a lot of people. So you want to be open to learning new things, be accepting of every person you're gonna meet. And honestly, just be kind when you're moving. If you just be kind, reach out to people if you need help. You know, um, the biggest advice, honestly, is just be open to new experiences and to different people, and find a community. Know what you like, because there are so many things for you to do, especially in a city like Toronto. So go online. If you like films, there are film groups. If you like nature, like I'm volunteering, there are so many things for you to get involved in. It's very easy to feel lonely if you don't intentionally do something. Know what you like and find people that also like the same things that you like, and it should be okay.
Thank you very much. As a joke now, why do Canadians always tell people to not come to Canada? Why is it always about the cold? What the fuck
The cold is
is
not
wrong
even
with
that bad. I
everybody?
always say it's only poor people that feel cold.
Only poor people. Oh my
Don't mind
God.
me. I said it's only if you're broken.
I'm
I mean, please don't put it
screaming.
here. But, no, but jokes aside, I'm just like, for the most part, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have a car, but like most
Yeah,
times is when you like, if you have a car, like it's not too bad. You can
yeah.
go from your house to your car to your destination. People like me that have to enter bus and have to go from one streetcar to the train to the this to walk, walk 10 blocks.
Before you finish, Kogo don't hammer you.
Well, honestly, it's not like the cold is in Ontario. Oh, not Ontario. Maybe in Toronto, the cold is
Yeah,
bearable. It's
yeah.
bearable. In Calgary, it's a different ball game. In Winnipeg, oh my god, Winnipeg is cold. So it depends on where you go, and if you can, when you're landing, you should have money for cash because some of these places without car, it's miserable.
When you said this pop, I actually thought you were going to talk about not being able to buy quality, what is it called?
Jacket.
Jackets.
Even with
But
that
now you
jacket,
said,
sometimes even with the quality of the Canada goods, me, I'm taking reference to car because I don't have car.
let me tell you something someone told me. This guy is driving. I was in Austria for a while.
Mm.
So we were talking about jackets. I can't remember how the conversation went when we started talking about jackets. And he was saying something along the lines that sometimes he knows people. I think we're talking about how locals identify foreigners, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. He's Russian, but he was in Germany. He was in Austria at the time. He's lived there for a while. And he
Mm-hmm.
said something about clothing. And he now told me that the jacket I had on, that once he saw that, even if he had not interacted with me, he would know that I'm a newbie because
Mm.
nobody in Europe was going to buy that jacket. I'm like,
It's too light.
it's not about the lightness. It's not light. I remember asking him, okay, I
What
remember
was it
asking
about
him
the
if it's
jacket?
about the light. And he
Mm.
can't explain it. And because I asked him, he said he can't put his hand on it, but he just knows that once he sees the jacket, nobody in Europe was going to buy it. And I'm like, bloody.
No, that is not so much. I mean, the jacket plays a role because I remember when I came here, I had one very light. Well, my sister that bought my jacket for me from England, and
Yeah.
the same jacket you wear in London is not the same that you wear in Hamilton, so Canada. So it was proper lights. Like you would need to like layer up like 10 layers. Um,
Mm.
but jackets, good jacket, but like that car can come in very handy. Me, I won't lie you.
Sure, I understand. And for me, see that jacket, that was the very end of
Mm.
that's the beginning of the end of that jacket because this was the jacket that was saving my life. I got it from Nigeria, let's be honest. But it
Okay.
was it saved my life through this was around even early spring when this
Mm.
conversation happened. So this jacket had saved me through my first winter in Europe. And
Mm-hmm.
this papa said nobody in Europe was going to buy that jacket. And I'm like, is it because of the color? Because it's wine red or
Mm.
burgundy, something along that line. And I
And
was
was
like,
it
is it because of this?
like down feathers and
No,
stuff, like
no,
puffy?
no. It's just normal length, just a
No,
little
like
bit
the
above the knee.
what material was like a puffer, or like
No, it wasn't one of those puffer ones. It was one of
yeah.
those puffer ones. It looked plain, but I think it was able to do the job. But
Mm.
when someone says something like that, you would have to rethink. That jacket was
I don't
not
want
going
to
to
look like a
it
JJ
was not
student. I
going
want
to
to.
make it. That jacket never made it. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
I've given it out to someone, but that there was no way that jacket was going to make. That was one of I will never forget that. But I think also it's like you said, once you begin to live in it, you also begin to learn the kind of jacket that work. Because
That
I have
yeah,
jackets that depending on how cold it is, you can say okay, this is more suitable. The other one is going to be for lighter weather and stuff like that.
brain. Yeah.
It's
And just the trick is just layering up, to be honest. Like even with my
true.
jacket, depending on because you could get to like negative 20 something,
Yeah.
It's like okay, thermal wear is something, and then a jumper, and then your jacket. And then you'll be fine. Just put your hand in your pocket, put your head down, and go until
And
you
go to
buy
your
a car.
destination. Okay, bye. But till then, please tell your country people to stop discouraging people from coming to
No, please
Canada.
come. I love seeing Nigerians come. Oh my God. I just want to say the new immigrants of Nigerians that have
Yeah,
moved here are so impressive. So impressive. Like once they get here, they're getting really good jobs. They're like, you can see how their life has just like progressed within the span of a year
yeah,
or two. And then like the quality of Nigerians that may have met Sha,
yeah,
I'm just like in awe all the time. Like when they get here, 6-figure jobs. And I'm like, huh? Because Nigeria, you've been suffering. And then you say, it can be this easy? What do you mean? Some of them are working 2 jobs. So like, I'm
just
so
two
impressed
jobs.
by them.
Yeah,
I'm so impressed by the hustle. I'm like, if you can, come. Like, I'm like, come before they figure out and say, oh, not anymore. So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank
don't
you
listen to
very
them.
much once again. This has
No
been a
worries.
very insightful conversation. It's also been a very fun conversation. Maybe we
Likewise.
should be able to do this again
Yeah.
sometime. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. And if you've listened to this part of the podcast, thank you very much for following us all through the journey and for sticking with me all through the episode of this podcast I've been recording. I really appreciate you, even for the times I've been inconsistent and you showing up. Thank you very much. And remember, like, subscribe, and share with your family and friends, and come back for the next episode. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.
Yay. Bye.